Welcome to How to Talk to Kids About Anything with Dr. Robyn Silverman, a podcast loaded with practical tips, powerful scripts, personal stories, and simple steps to make even the toughest conversations easier. So get ready to get the information you need to make the impact you want from someone you trust, your friend, parenting expert, Dr. Robyn Silverman.
Hello and welcome to How to Talk to Kids About Anything, where we give you the tips, scripts, stories, and steps to make even the toughest conversations easier. I'm so honored to be your host, Dr. Robyn Silverman, child and teen development specialist, author, and speaker, and most importantly, parent of two great kids who give me the opportunity to love, learn, and grow every single day, whether I want to or not. Believe me, I get it. It's not always easy, but we're in this together, and we have some great people helping us along the way. Now, if we step back and think about it, without any emotion and without any skin in the game, we could probably agree that perfect does not exist, and comparing ourselves to perfect or to others can just take a chunk out of our self-esteem because we're always going to fall short. Of course, many children and teens suffer from poor self-esteem, and many adults do too. What about for the child who feels different? The child or teen who isn't necessarily striving to be perfect, but striving to just sort of seem like everyone else, and they're not, or be seen as what they know their parents would find acceptable, their peers would expect, their teachers would reward, or society details as what is beautiful or acceptable or honored or necessary to build a successful life. When children and teens don't fit the mold, what they like to do or how they show up in the world and their gender identity don't fit like puzzle pieces in society at large, without the child needing to sort of maybe shave off pieces of themselves to cram themselves in. How do we parent those children so that they know that they're worthy of love and kindness? How do we talk to them about tough topics like bullying or discrimination or identity or the ugly voice inside their own heads that might tell them the meanest things? What mistakes do we need to avoid? And what can we do instead to raise someone who doesn't fit in any box? For that, we turn to my next amazing guest, Jeffrey Marsh. Jeffrey Marsh is a non-binary activist, author, Instagram and TikTok star, and LGBTQ keynote speaker with over 1 billion social media views. Jeffrey was the first non-binary author to sign with the Big Five publisher with their amazing best-selling memoir, which I read, How to Be You, Stop Trying to Be Someone Else and Start Living Your Life. On a personal note, I started following Jeffrey, and when they talk to you on Instagram or TikTok videos, it's like they're talking to you. It's so genuine and so beautiful. And I'm just so honored to have Jeffrey Marsh on the show today and perhaps introduce you to someone who can open our minds about how we can help our kids step into who they are, whoever that may be, drop the facade and just be their fabulous self, living their best life and spreading their gifts. To bring out the elephant in the room before we get started, I'm aware that some of you might be feeling a little uncomfortable right now, especially when we may be discussing kids who identify as LGBTQ. And I implore you to stick with us and open your mind and your heart, because this conversation is of grave importance. And I'm not exaggerating. We have a beautiful person to help us through it. Welcome, Jeffrey Marsh, to How to Talk to Kids About Anything.
Hello.
Hello.
I love you so much. I almost just fainted with how good you are at this.
Oh, thank
I almost
you.
just fell over, because sometimes the host will do the intro without, separately, without the guest there, right?
Yes.
So I got the great opportunity. I was sitting here the whole time and just beaming with how, famous I am and how much I've accomplished.
You kind of are.
But in addition to that, how beautifully you set it up.
Oh, thank you.
And the whole experience from first being contacted by you to today shows that you deeply care
I do.
You care about the kids, you care about the parents, you care about the show. You just are, everything you do is infused with care.
Mm. You're so special. There's just, as I mentioned in the
Well,
intro,
were
you just have
lies
a way.
detected? Was I lying to you?
No,
true.
it's
You do
just like
care.
so sincere. And
Yeah.
thank you for lifting me up. That is beautiful. I love the way that you do that for your audience. I love that way that you just did that for me. Before we leap into everything, I would love to know what gets you up in the morning and what got you so interested in focusing on stop trying to be someone else and start living your own life. What got you so interested in this self-esteem piece, this identity piece?
Well, there are about a million ways I could answer that question, but let's start with I had ill-equipped parents.
Yeah.
My parents and my school teachers, other kids in my class, people at church, I can't ever remember encountering someone who really fully loved and accepted me for who I am when I was a kid. So it was a constant message of change yourself, do this different, mostly butch it up, Jeffrey, do this, fit in this box over here, make this, please Jesus, all of these messages from every single person. Be different. There is something wrong with you. Change who you are. And I got to a point where I made those outside voices into inside voices. And you beautifully hinted at this already, right? But the self-hate that I enthusiastically adopted, gosh, I mean, I could talk about it. Let me see if I can talk about it poetically. Almost made it so that I would not be here with you today. On several occasions, actually. And things got so bad that eventually I did something very drastic and I moved to a Buddhist monastery.
Wow.
And lived as a monk in the monastery.
Wow.
And learned that the most important thing is how we treat ourselves and the ways that we love ourselves. And can I say one more thing?
Yes,
about that?
Please do.
It just excites me so much. For anyone listening, and this goes for your kids, and this goes for you as a parent, the thing you were told is most wrong with you is your greatest gift to the world.
I agree with that. Oh,
good.
And
we don't have to fight on it.
No, reframing your strength, like reframing the thing that seems to draw them back and make them cower and make them feel bad. If we repackage it as parents, helping kids to see it as a strength. Let me give you an example.
Please.
And so I have a son who is, he has ADHD and he obviously gets distracted by different things. And that means when he's in school, if he sees, like if somebody's out in the hallway, he's going to hear them and his attention is going to go outward. If something's happening outside, he's going to notice that. And that's one of the ways I was kind of explaining ADHD to him, but I said to him, but it's also a gift. So that same thing that kind of pulls your attention this way and that way makes you love science, a great scientist. You notice things. You have a noticer's brain. And you notice the things other people don't. So that means that when we're standing outside and you go, Mom, do you see that deer across the lake, hiding between the trees? It's camouflage. And I'm looking and looking, or the moss on the rock, or the sunset, which I pass by constantly. And he's like, Mom, did you notice this beautiful sunset? Well, then you can take something that can look like something that bites you in the butt and actually turns out is the very thing that propels you forward.
I love the way you phrase that. Yeah. Well, and here's a little tip I learned at the Buddhist monastery. there is nothing wrong to focus on.
Oh.
Meaning your attention is always somewhere. Society, culture tends to have ideas about what is correct to focus on.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But that's just made up. And as
Right.
you so beautifully pointed out, if you started by saying that your child will be distracted. And I even think, my goodness, your child has an omnivorous attention.
Mm.
Your child has a talent for being able to focus and focus quickly on things that conventionally other folks don't focus on.
Mm-hmm.
And to make that into, something wrong with a person
Mm-hmm.
just seems really unfortunate to me.
Agreed. So in your book, and I know this is one of your favorite
Mhm.
spots, but in your book, one of the areas that you talk about is fear. And you talk about it several times. Fear holding us back from doing the things that we're meant to do, being our true selves, from learning something. You even say fear is an indication that your horizons are about to broaden. I love that. Circled it, underlined it, starred
Yeah.
it. Yeah. When it comes to parents and children and fear, you kind of get a double dose. The parents are fearful about their child trying something new, not all the time, but let's say in this situation, because this happens a lot, the parent is nervous about the child trying something new, going someplace new, meeting somebody new. And the child reflects that and is also fearful of trying something new. The child is fearful and projects that out. And then it's like this big, feedback loop. So if we have for the parents listening right now, what do you want them to know about fear and how they can help their child to face their fears by maybe also facing their own?
Oh, you answered it. You answered for me.
How about that?
What almost no parent wants to hear. So parents DM me all the time, and I do coaching, and sometimes I will coach parents. It's very popular for a parent to want to know how to treat their LGBTQ kid. And I have great/awful news. You have to do the work yourself.
Mhm.
The question is always, what are you demoing
Mhm.
for your kid?
Mhm.
And if you're demoing that fear, maybe not always, but chances are that fear will just be inherited. Because we know that from our own experience, right? We inherited that from our parents.
Right.
And I found out as an adult that both of my parents were afraid.
Yeah.
I
It
couldn't
gave you another understanding of them, it seemed.
Yes.
So, right?
Yep. Yeah. So there was a point where my dad apologized for my childhood.
Ugh,
And
wow.
my to his credit, right? I think that's a
To
good
his
thing.
credit, for sure.
But he said, I was afraid of what other parents would think of me, that I had an
Oh,
LGBTQ child.
got it.
But when I was a kid, the only thing I got was, my dad hates me, right? The only thing I got was, there's something deeply wrong with me and no one on earth understands me. And, part of me, when my dad said that, I was like 30. And part of me was like, couldn't you have said that when I was like 7? When I needed to hear that,
Right.
And if parents are driven by that fear, I think it's almost inevitable that kids will sponge that up.
So when you came out to your parents,
Mhm.
according to your book, it didn't go so well. Your
Correct.
mom was very surprised and scared. I thought that was pretty obvious in the way that you wrote it.
Yeah.
Perhaps scared, I would say, right? And told you that you don't know anything about this. Okay, you're only 11. Like, you don't know what you're talking about. You should be thinking about this, whatever. Your father, as you mentioned in your videos, you tried to beat the LGBTQ out of you. So can you tell us the do's and don'ts of what to do or say when a child, either our child or our student, or our niece or our nephew comes out to us. Like, what should we not do or say now that you have this great perspective? And what should we do or say? Like, what do you wish was done or said?
It's a dangerous question to answer because I don't want people to think that parents are required to be perfect.
Good point.
I actually never, so I could give you the, the tips and tricks, and, I'm happy to. But if I never craved a mom that was perfect, I honestly just craved a mom that was a little more frank.
And connected, right? Like there was like a
Yeah, that could
connection.
tell me, that could even tell me, I don't know about all this LGBTQ stuff, or, I'm a little scared. I saw on TV that you might get a disease,
Right.
all the stuff that was going through her mind, so that we could just talk about it.
Right.
And I think a lot of parents have this idea that you need to have this perfect front, quote unquote, you're the parent, so you have to be like the final answer giver kind of energy. And goodness, not at all. I think as a kid, I just craved wanting to see the process more, honestly.
It's so beautifully said. And I hope that listeners are really tuning into that. And I just want to put high beams on that it's not in what you're saying, it's just being present and making sure that your kid knows that you're on the same page, like you're willing to do the work to find out the information, to connect with other people who might know more, that you're there maybe as not the final person, but maybe the bridge to somebody else who might know more, because maybe you don't know, and that's okay. Maybe you never lived it, and that's okay.
Yeah. And to circle back for a second, you have to be doing the work yourself. That's how you can find that vulnerability with your own kid. That's how you can talk about your process, because you've looked at it yourself. And that's what no parent wants to. So maybe we'll have a chance to talk about the binary and what women are programmed into and what men are programmed into, and what the differences
I would love to talk about that. Yeah, I would love to.
Especially when it comes to parenting. But what I can say right off the bat is a lot of moms coach with me, and almost all of them were programmed by their own moms into thinking that having a family means you sacrifice everything. And so what a lot of daughters learn is, oh, sacrifice.
Right.
Right.
Give of yourself.
That's my identity. Sacrifice.
Give of yourself until there's nothing left. And that's okay. Like that exhaustion, that mental exhaustion, that physical exhaustion is fine as long as everybody else stays afloat.
Yes. And then while you're mentally, physically exhausted, can't you give a little more?
Yeah. Like,
shouldn't you also be baking for the church?
Yes. Oh, that's right. There's a bake sale.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
So why don't you tell people what, actually somebody literally just asked me the other day when I was at a neighbor's house, because I told them I was interviewing you, and they said, I don't understand, like what is non-binary? Like what are we even talking about here? So how about explaining to people who are listening what it means to be non-binary and how it fits in a little bit with like LGBTQ, because I think people know, okay, I know what it means to be gay. I know what it means to be lesbian. I know it, I know a couple of these letters, but I don't know, there's no N. So what is non-binary? I'm so glad you're humored by me. See?
Well, no, I absolutely am. And one thing that I love the most about LGBTQ people is, and our movement, is that we're the ones adding letters.
Yes, I see that. Yes.
We're the inclusive ones, right? Yes. We're the alphabet, right? Pretty soon we'll be at all 26 and they'll all stand for something, right? And everybody is welcome.
Yes.
Right? That's what I love. So what is non-binary? I don't think you got a chance to mention it, but I was also the very first non-binary person to appear on national TV.
Oh, wow.
And talk about us. And it happened to be on a network called Newsmax, if you've heard of them.
I don't know have I heard of Newsmax?
So something about the LGBTQ experience, that the very first person, me, to talk about us, it was in it was in a not supportive environment.
Oh gosh, that stinks.
It does stink,
really
but it also
stinks.
says something about perseverance and who we are and what needed to happen first. And, so when we talk about the binary, we're talking about what most people are taught is the sum of gender, man and woman. That's two. And that's we semi-affectionately call the binary, right? So anybody who is non-binary is just somebody that's not a man, not a woman, maybe a combo of the two, maybe somewhere else, maybe something that's, between, who knows? And it is a way to refer to folks that are outside those boxes that most parents think they have to teach their kids are the only boxes. I don't know if that's helpful.
No, it really is. And how does it relate to trans then?
Trans is a huge umbrella term. So trans includes, oh gosh, can I nerd out for a second?
I love the nerding out. I'm making my PhD. Come on.
Trans, okay, good. Trans, Trans, is a Latin prefix, and its opposite in Latin is cis, CIS. And so you can actually have, I'll pull an example. It actually comes up in STEM a lot. But to pull out an example, you can do it with geography. And so you can go on a trip that is transatlantic, goes across the Atlantic. You can also go on a trip from Baltimore to New York City that is cis-Atlantic, stays on the same side of Atlantic. And so trans just means on the other side of, and cis means on the same side of. Scientists will use it to refer to where an electron is, for example. When we put it in front of gender, it means transgender. It means someone who has gone to the other side of, as opposed to cisgender, someone who has stayed on the same side.
And it's still then binary, right?
Well, that's a great question, because that's the next step. So trans has become this umbrella term to include both transgender people, someone like Laverne Cox, someone like Caitlyn Jenner, people who have gone from one side of the binary to another side, or people like me, non-binary, people who are not going to a particular side of that binary.
Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you.
You're so welcome. And by the way, when I talk to high schoolers, 12-year-olds, right, they understand that.
People tell me all the time, like, aren't they going to be confused, not just about this, about every topic that I come up with, right? I mean, how to talk to kids about porn, death, sex,
it's like, aren't they going to be confused?
Aren't they going to be confused? And I'm like,
the first words out of everyone's mouth.
Yeah, they're really not. They completely get it. We adopted our kids, so like I get a lot of the questions like, aren't they confused about having a birth mother and a birth? No, it's not confusing. Having a birth mother, birth father, or their parents, like, it's not confusing. It just is. It's life,
You're like, that's an easy answer. No,
but they just take it in.
Yes, I wanted to say this way back in the very beginning, because you had a caveat for this whole episode. And my caveat would be, parents tend to leap in their minds to, oh, if I have to talk about LGBTQ identities with my kids, I have to talk about sex, right? And like all human beings, LGBTQ people have a darn full life. Sex is a part of that, but our identities are all over the place, and we have stories and families and everything that cisgender or straight people have. We have all that stuff too.
Right.
And the other thing it's, when it's time to have an age-appropriate conversation about sex and dating and all that stuff with your kid, go for it, would be my recommendation.
For sure.
But they can know about gender identity, they can know about LGBTQ people, they can know about families that are different from their own family, and it's all fine.
Yes.
I don't know if
I think it's really important. And I think it's also the other fear that a lot of parents tend to have is if I talk about it, sex, suicide, any of these tough topics, LGBTQ,
You'll give them the idea to do it.
you give them the idea to do it.
No,
It does not work that way. I have a friend, Jessica Herthel, who wrote a children's book with Jazz Jennings. I Am Jazz.
Yeah.
So Jess is, she and I went to high school together, and she's on this podcast too. She talked about how to talk about transgender from her perspective of an activist. And so we read that book. She sent me the galley copy when my kids were like 4 and 3. There's my husband reading this to them, right? Which was great. And then it was like not much time after that where they met somebody who was transgender, a kid. Oh, is this person's like Jazz, like the I Am Jazz? Yeah. Oh, okay. Move on. It's like when you talk to them about it, it's like they get it so quick that they can then understand people. You got to talk about this stuff with people, because then they just accept people for who they are, and then they can just move on with their lives. Like it's not a big deal.
Oh my gosh. I can't tell you the number of times that a young kid has said to me, "Are you a boy or a girl?"
Mm-hmm.
And I say, gee, I don't think I've decided for today yet. And you just give an age appropriate answer.
Right.
That's true for you. And that makes perfect sense to them.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
It seems
exactly.
to.
It seems to. And they're accepting.
Yes. The other thing you made me think of is people ask me all the time in interviews, what advice would you give your 6-year-old self?
Yes.
And I always say, I would ask my 6-year-old self for advice. Are you kidding?
So beautiful.
That was the age when I knew how people should treat each other and what the
Mm-hmm.
world was like and what it meant to be a human being, right?
Right.
I would love to hear what 6-year-old Jeffrey really thought of all that stuff.
Yes.
Because
I like to tap into that. Yes.
As I get older, I get less sure of all that stuff.
Yeah, you talk about confidence a lot, and that piece. Like, I'm not confident all the time. I would ask you, like, when a person bravely does declare to their parents that they're trans and that they would like to start living in a way that feels more true to them. This is a huge change, not just for the person who is going through that transition, but for the people around them too. I think it's scary for people. It's not easy for people to begin this journey. It's not easy for people in the middle of the journey and to know what to do or say or how to take it in. I certainly have friends that are coping with this right now and trying to figure out, like, how do I help my child? Like, my child is feeling really strange about their bodies, and they're having a lot of struggles. What advice would you give to parents of trans teens?
You're already there. That's my advice. My parents never asked, how could I help my LGBTQ child, right? So to me, asking that question is the work. And doing the work and being messy and in process is good parenting to me. How can I help my child? Oh my goodness, you're in the headspace that you want to know. That's a good parent. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
That's it. You're doing it.
That's it. And just showing up.
Yeah. And
there's some very scary statistics out there, though, regarding LGBTQ kids, and you can't deny them. I mean, who wind up in the streets, who die by suicide, who are rejected, by their parents. The Suicide Prevention Resource Center estimated that between 5 to 10% of LGBTQ youth, depending on age and gender, have attempted suicide, a rate that is 1.5 to 3 times higher than heterosexual youth. 1.6 million youth are homeless each year, and up to 40% of them are LGBTQ. So can you help us to understand what goes on in a young person's head or heart when they're being rejected for who they are? And what do we lose out on as parents, as educators, as society? when we try to talk our kids out of being who they are?
Love that question. You miss out on some of the most beautiful people that you'll ever encounter in your life.
Mm.
And of course, in order to dim the light of your LGBTQ child, you got to be dimming your own too. So it's probably something you'd want to look at just for your own freedom, in addition to having a free, happy, healthy LGBTQ child too.
Mm-hmm.
I'll throw another number at you because GLSEN is an org that I work with, and they do a school survey every year or every couple of years. And the latest school survey, a child's, it's difficult to talk about. An LGBTQ child's rate of considering suicide drops by about 42% if they have one adult in their life who affirms who they are.
Wow.
And the sort of subtle implication, I know we talked about how intelligent you are earlier, so you probably have already picked up on this, but the subtle implication beneath that is many, 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 many children have zero adults who affirm who they are. That's how they could study it, right?
There's research that tells us that young people don't feel that they have at least three adults to turn to in a time of need or challenge. And so when I'm speaking to audiences about all of this, I just tell them to be one of the three. Like, it doesn't matter who you are. Like, you
Dye
can
your
be
hair
the
purple.
parent. Yeah,
become a librarian.
Yes. Whatever you are, like whoever you are, whatever key adult there is, like, we've got coaches listening, and we've got, educators listening, and yes, parents, yes, aunts and uncles. Like, we have all these different people that are listening in. Like, just be one of those three. Just be the one. Just be one, as you're saying.
Yeah. I was joking around. You don't have to dye your hair purple, everyone.
You don't have to, or become a librarian. I mean, if you don't want to, but you can.
I feel we should have more of those in the world. So as many librarians as we can get in the world. Yeah, I was joking, and the hint inside the joke was be overt about it. Be really proud. Put up that poster. Have the rainbow keychain, right? Really let people know. Because if kids are desperate and looking, gosh, you want to give them that signal often, early, overtly. Yeah.
I think that's really important. So when it comes to like talking just about gender identity, like the kind of umbrella, since I do all my work is surrounding talking to kids about tough topics and helping people kind of take that step, a lot of them really do want to know what to say because they don't know what to say. Like, so we just give them some starting things, like starting words. So how do I talk to kids about sex? How do I talk to kids about death? A lot of them wait until like their uncle dies, and then all of a sudden they're like, I have to talk to my kid about death, and then they write to me. I posit that we need to be doing it earlier. How would you say that we start to talk to kids about gender when you're telling us it's more nuanced than one thing or another? And I would say to anybody, because we've got some kids that are like girls playing with dolls and boys playing football, and parents going, I don't really need to talk to them about gender because they're swimming along and doing the thing that society says is appropriate. So
look at the time, they're 18. Okay, bye.
So what is when do you feel like we should be talking about it? What should we be saying? What should we talk about when it comes to gender identity? Because I think it's something that a lot of parents just don't talk about, since it's just the kid is who they are, and we just move on. Yeah,
I know you're famous around the world, and you have an international listenership. So I'm going to tell a story about kindergarten, and that's around 5 years old in the U.S. And I got in trouble for taking all the dresses, the princess dresses, and I was all. And when through my social media feed, whenever I interact with kindergarten teachers, they say, yeah, the personality is pretty much set,
Mhm.
or at least pretty obvious by the time
Mhm.
you're around that age. And what's intriguing to me, and what we've been talking about this whole time, two things: your kid may want to do the talking. Be
Mm.
open to that. That would be first advice to me. And your kid, I just love the way you phrased it. I feel it's partly your responsibility as a parent to head some things off at the pass. Don't wait until your LGBTQ kid comes home and has been beat up at school or has been made fun of at school.
Mm.
Then we're in a territory where it's like urgency territory.
Yes. And they're
And
not
it's
even listening to you because they're thinking they just were beat up.
right. And the kid may even interpret your urgency as something wrong with them, that
Mm.
now they've created all these problems, right?
Mm. Mm.
By being who they are. And that's, we want to be able to talk about these things beforehand.
So
Good
what would
news
you
is,
say about it? Like, what would you say about this binary, or what would you say about gender identity and expectations and discrimination? Like, how would you start talking about this when you know you're sending out your child into the world and not everybody's going to be as accepting?
yeah, the thing that I immediately thought of, which I guess has become this theme of our show today, you have to be doing your own work.
Mhm.
An LGBTQ kid is an invitation for you to get over your own gender stuff.
Oh, yeah.
So if you want to know what to say, start by doing some of that work, and then it'll become obvious what to say.
Mhm.
So some of the biggest blowback, my TikTok was on Tucker Carlson's show.
Oh boy.
Tucker played it as an example of, how awful the world is and stuff like that.
Deviant TikTokers.
Yeah, how TikTok
Mhm.
is coming for your children and that sort of narrative.
Because you're clearly giving them the idea
Eh,
of what to
right.
do. Yes.
And some of the biggest hate I get is when I come after misogyny,
Mm.
when I come after gender roles. So not necessarily, I mean, I don't think that is like an LGBTQ thing.
No, it's
in
not.
quotes,
Not at all.
right?
No.
But one video I made was, there are no girls' toys. You should be able to play with what you want. There are
Mhm.
no boys' sports,
Yes.
right? Girls should be able to be on whatever team they want to be on, right?
Mm.
And that is some of the biggest blowback I've gotten,
Mhm.
because the
Mhm.
universal message for us, for non-binary people, for LGBTQ people, is freedom. So I don't know if you necessarily need to have certain language for your kid. You just have to be able to not have a terrible reaction when your son wants a Barbie.
Mm.
Do you know
Mhm.
what I mean? Like, it
Yes,
is
I do know
those
what you mean.
day-to-day intimate interactions. And if you let your kid lead and they ask questions and you've done your own homework, I mean, to me, you're golden.
I mean, listening to this, I feel like any parent that's listening to this right now is light years ahead. I mean, they're hearing
I would think so. Yeah, preaching to the
right?
choir.
I
Yeah.
mean, really, I think they're curious, we have amazing parents and educators and coaches listening, and they're curious. They want to know. And my friend the other day who asked me about non-binary,
Yeah.
he was like, I just don't get it. Like, I don't understand it. But he wasn't being like mean about it. He wasn't like saying it's wrong. He's just like, I don't understand it. Could you explain it? And I was like, well, I am not the expert in this, but I can explain to you what I know. And at the end, he was like, I now understand. Like, I now get it. Okay.
That's
He was
great.
like, it's not this and it's not that. Okay. Like, I get it now. And so a lot of people, I think, don't understand and want to be included in the conversation. So, but they don't know where to start. And so here we are, giving them this information. And I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, me too.
I would wonder, for those who are listening right now, and they're like, all right, I've got a kid in my class who definitely like Jeffrey, or like
something's happening.
Right, something's happening. Like, stole all the
there.
dresses, like what, like.
Yeah.
The parents are not supportive of this. Right. We've already discussed this, like they're not supportive of this. So what is your message to the aunts, the uncles, the educators, the coaches, the parent who's divorced and the other person is not, on the same team?
Ooh, Oh, that happens a lot. Yeah.
What
Mhm.
what is your message to those parents or educators or coaches when they have somebody in their family or who is directly in the family of that child if they're not, and they're not supportive? Like what can you say to the people who are like trying to hold the boat up here?
Overcompensate. That's what I would say.
Mm,
You better be the most rainbow enthusiastic, waving a flag, pride march
mhm.
human being, because we need a counterbalance.
Right, right.
You need, in some places, you need a counterbalance to your own governor.
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
And I'll tell you, so first advice is follow the law. So teachers in certain places can't help LGBTQ kids, period.
Right.
Or at least there's not a, not an easy way to do so.
Yeah.
So sad that I have to say that, but that's
That
number
is
one.
sad. It is true.
Number two,
But
if
following
that's
the law is important. True. Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
Number two, yeah, overcompensate. Just be very, very kind and
Mhm,
enthusiastic and
mhm,
loving,
mhm.
which I would hope someone is in a teaching profession or something like that, because
Yeah.
that's their goal.
I think that listening in on this podcast has probably brought up a lot of things for people. And let's say that some of the the adults who are listening, the key adults are listening, and they're like, I made a mistake. Like I blew this. Like I'm thinking of specific instances where I could have said this and I said that, or I did nothing, or I brushed under a rug and and I blew it. So what do you want adults to know as they're currently privately bashing themselves in their own head for telling their child that they shouldn't be who they are, that they need help, that they need to be somebody different? If they tried harder, they could be straight, and now are seeing the child slip away from them, slip away from themselves. What would you say to these people now who are, many of them listening probably right now, realize they've been making a mistake? What do you want them to know right now?
Call it out, talk about it, communicate that to your kid. Don't be, the thing you can do right now is say, oh gosh, I really made some mistakes. I'm so sorry. Right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
And have the talk with your kid. That's what you can do immediately.
Yeah. It's like
Longer
I
term,
messed up. I messed up, and now I know
yes.
better. I can do better. I know better. I can do better.
And it's perfectly fine to say that. And what more beautiful, graceful thing to teach your kid than how to mess up and
Yes.
call it out,
I
right?
do it constantly. Literally
Yes.
constantly. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Longer term, again, do your own work. When I work with people, I'll sometimes assign somebody to write down some of the voices in their head, and having them out of their head and on a piece of paper.
Yeah.
They have voices saying, oh, you're so fat. Oh, you're disgusting. How could you? Right? Ew, you just, ugh, right? They just, the level of evil going on inside our own heads is a shock to people.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I talk to people about the voices, and I actually will ask them, who is that? Like, whose voice is that?
It's a good question, right?
Right? Because it's
someone's
like,
running your life in there. Who is that?
who is it? And it's like, oh, this boy in fourth grade, he told me that, my nose was really big and now I only see a nose, or that a parent had made this one comment about me, looking how I looked in this outfit, and now I feel this way. So it's whose voice is that? And then realizing that it's somebody else's voice. And when they can decipher that it's somebody else's voice and not their own, they can otherize it. And it's easier to talk back to them. Like, I'm like, name it. You're like, damn it, Peter. Like, you're not doing this again. Like, you're wrong. I don't agree with you. Take it out of yourself. Because when you think it's your own voice, it's hard to argue with yourself. But if it's like Peter or that teacher that you used to have that made that comment about how you're never going to amount to anything, like,
yeah,
you can talk back to them.
Not just teacher, parent, perhaps.
Parent. Yeah. I mean, we have great
Caregiver,
teachers and great parents,
perhaps.
but yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
well, you brought up such an excellent point. earlier, and I wanted to underline it and come back to it. Your friend didn't get it, didn't get non-binary, and then
Yes.
eventually got it, right?
Yes.
But so many people make the mistake, and parents make this mistake too, which is why it seemed relevant to the episode today. Sometimes you don't get it. And what I would encourage everyone to do is love anyway, respect anyway. So there are a ton of LGBTQ youths who come to mom and dad and say, I'm non-binary, and mom and dad don't get it. But mom and dad assume they have to get it before they respect it. It's the other way. Respect your child first, and then sometime in the future, you might get it, like your friend demoed so beautifully, right? If you start with an assumption of love, start with an assumption of respect, start with an assumption of someone's beautiful humanity, you might get it later. You might sometime, right?
I want to go to your top tip, but before we do, you mentioned something in the beginning about haters. Might have been even before we got started, but I mean, what's the message for the parents who are like, I love my child, like I embrace my child, and they send them out into the world, and there's these terrible people who tell them that they're not good enough and that they should change, and they're in the school, like they're with them for hours, or they see them out, just in the community or in the neighborhood. Like, where is the message for the parents who are dealing with these haters and their child who they love so much and they don't know what to do?
Oh, goodness. We could do a whole episode on hate.
I know. I think you have to come back.
Where it comes from. And yeah, that'll be our part 2.
Yeah, part 2.
And the reasons for it and all of that. It is deeply unfair. Your LGBTQ child will face terribleness, discrimination, hatred. They won't be safe. I can't sugarcoat any of it, and I don't feel it would be a service to sugarcoat any of that for anyone listening. If your kid goes out in the world, they might, depending on where you live, or they may be physically, actually unsafe many, many, many times in their life. What you can do is overcompensate and give them a home base. Somebody actually just DM'd me about this just a couple of days ago and said, I keep my LGBTQ child in a bubble. We have the neighbors we can trust. We have the school friends we can trust. We have the one family member, the aunt.
I
who
get
we
that
know is safe,
temptation. That makes sense. Yeah.
And keep them in the bubble. And this person was saying, is that wrong? Is that bad as a parent? Should I not do that? And I said, oh, please keep them in a bubble for as long as you possibly can. Make sure they know that there are people who love them. Make sure they know that there are human beings who support them, and they'll find out soon enough. There are people who hate their guts.
It's hard because you want your child to live. You want your child to go out into the world and take gymnastics if they want to, and not have to worry about the person who's giving them bad feedback about themselves, not their form doing a cartwheel. And the idea of needing to keep them close to you instead of individuate the way that is appropriate for any child to be able to do and be able to stand on their own 2 feet, it's just profoundly unfair.
I'm glad you said that. Yes, to me, the bubble serves the purpose of them having a safe space to be. Not to steer them away from individuating, which again is, yes, very important. And I mean, gosh, it's so hard to talk about because it's also an invitation for courage.
Yeah.
As a parent and as the kid.
As a child, yeah.
Yeah, because they're going to have to be very strong in order to survive. I can't phrase it another way.
Knowing that they can come home to a safe haven,
I think it's
maybe the very
helpful
thing that kind of keeps them going, like allows them to go out into the world and deal with the frustration. I might also say is when I talk about bullying, not for LGBTQ in particular, just in
Yeah.
general, that you want to be able to identify your safe people, your safe places in the school. If you're being picked on in certain areas, if you're being discriminated against certain areas, that you have certain advocates at the school, allies at the school, that make it so you're not constantly in that situation, that they're aware of what's going on and then can help in that case. I mean, that so that they can navigate an everyday.
Absolutely. And that's another thing parents can do is the groundwork.
Mm-hmm.
Go into that school and find out, if who can be a safe person and who can't be. Lay as much groundwork as you can, right?
Right.
You made me think of something so well. When I was in high school, I sat in the back of the class because I didn't want to be the center of attention, and because attention was bad to me in a lot of ways, in the ways we're talking about now. And so at one point in study hall, I was going from the back of the class to the front and crossing the front, and one of the school bullies was in the front and he tripped me and I fell down. And that bully said, "Watch where you're going, F word," in front of the whole class. And the class started laughing. It was the longer F word, not the shorter one. Wink, wink.
Yeah.
Watch where you're going. And the class started laughing. And I looked up and the teacher was laughing.
Oh.
And thought it was hilarious. And that kind of, to be able to raise a kid who's going to have to face some of that stuff, that their governor hates them, right? Their school legislators hate them, the pastor, other teachers, talk about just authority figures. And it's so difficult to be able to field some of that stuff. So yeah, as a parent, you have to be extra credit kind, extra credit enthusiastic.
So give us your top tip. What would you want people to come away with after reading your book or listening to this podcast about self-esteem, about gender identity, about helping their kid live their best life or themselves really start to do the work, as you're saying? What kind of things do you do top tip that you really want them to come away with?
It goes against everything you can imagine. And we hinted at this earlier, especially how women are usually programmed and raised, moms. You have to be doing this work yourself. I went away, I studied Zen for over 20 years. And we discussed, I was part of an order. I do not live with self-hate. And that was the most important thing I could have ever done in my life. And I'm not saying you have to get to that level, but how you talk to yourself inside your head and working through all of that stuff, to me, is almost more important than how you're going to treat your kid. Because it will fall out. How you're going to treat your kid will fall from that process. But just the idea that self-care is selfish has done so much damage. And if anything, I would say it's the opposite. Self-care makes you a selfless person.
Yes, you have more to give.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. You're
More
full,
to give,
so
you're
you have
full.
more to give. Yeah.
What's the resource of the week? Where can we go to get more information about you, your book, and the work you're doing?
Well, I mean, Google me, baby. Come join me on TikTok. Yeah. And I make a point to be ultra accessible. hello@jeffreymarsh.com. If anyone wants to say hi. I don't, because of the hate I get, I don't check it directly, but it will get to me. I'm everywhere. So
yes. Well, I'll be putting all of your links in the show notes. So anybody who's driving or running or whatever you're doing, don't worry, we got you. And I just want to thank you so much for being on the show today. It was so much fun having you on. So interesting, such a learning process. And I can't even pick a favorite part. I just feel like you have such a way about yourself and sharing it with us so that we can be more understanding of our children and more understanding of the LGBTQ community. It's so important. It is such an important step for all of us to take. I thank you, listeners, for sticking through and really learning something, keeping your mind open. We can all do this together. So thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah, and I'm going to turn the tables on you. So I don't mind if people are uncomfortable with LGBTQ people. We got to talk about it.
We got to talk about it.
If you're going to become more comfortable,
that's right.
We got to talk about it. So we got to start somewhere, right?
Totally my theory.
Yeah. And the thing that I love most about you is that you show the process. You show the seams. You show the weak points. You show the emotion. And that to me is essential. Gosh. Yeah. Love it.
You're such a
So thanks for having me today.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure.
It was a pleasure
to be with you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Well, everybody, I've got my takeaways, and sweet friends, I know you have yours. Let's discuss them. Come up on Facebook. We can go to the Dr. Robyn Silverman page. We can chat about it at drrobynsilverman.com. You can get on Twitter under Dr. Robyn. I'm also on Instagram. Nothing like Jeffrey, but I'm working on it. Okay. I'm also on Instagram, just starting the TikTok under Dr. Robyn Silverman. I'm working my butt off. And if you love this podcast like I did, I hope you'll go up to iTunes and rate and review it. I can't tell you how much those 5-star reviews mean to me, because it means that other people are going to see the podcast with the algorithm and the whole thing, and they will learn about Jeffrey and read Jeffrey's book and
you might
learn
save
about
an
all these
LGBTQ
things.
kid's life with
And
a 5-star review.
You may. Thank you.
And this was definitely a 5-star episode.
Thank
in
you.
My opinion.
Agreed. And that's all the time we have for today. My fellow parents, leaders, and educators, thank you so much for tuning in to How to Talk to Kids About Anything. For more information on books, articles, speaking engagements, or curriculum, please go to drrobynsilverman.com. There's so many great podcasts up there, and the show notes to this podcast will be up there as well. So you can read all about it, get all those links, press on those links, and follow Jeffrey. And please remember, even on the days when you fall short, you've got this. You're here. You're getting the information you need. I know it's not easy, but never forget that you are here getting this information so that you can apply it to your child, that you can apply it in real time. Parenting can often provide the ultimate do-over. So if you messed up, it's okay. Go back, admit it, say what you wished you said, say what you wished you didn't say. I'm there, right there with you. And as there are moments when we doubt our know-how, our choices, and our sweet sanity, please know you're 10 times the parent you think you are. Until next time, this is Dr. Robyn Silverman with How to Talk to Kids About Anything. Please tune in again and keep connecting through conversation. See you next week.
You've been listening to How to Talk to Kids About Anything with Dr. Robyn Silverman. For more information on books, articles, speaking engagements, or curriculum, please visit drrobynsilverman.com.